From regularly skipping dinners with his cast members to immersing himself in American Prometheus and the Bhagavad Gita, here's how Oppenheimer took a huge toll on Cillian Murphy. The movie's generated Oscar buzz since the day it dropped in theaters. Everyone who watched it couldn't stop praising the supporting cast's performances. Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, Rami Malek, Alden Ehrenreich. It's amazing how Christopher Nolan squeezed award-winning performances out of all of them. But it's Cillian who truly and completely mesmerized the audience. He gave a tour de force interpretation of one of the most complicated men in modern history. And it was a giant undertaking, too. J. Robert Oppenheimer was a complex and controversial figure. His turbulent relationship with Jean Tatlock, his explosive meeting with then-President Harry Truman. It was a lot for Cillian to wrap his head around, but he was more than up for the challenge. He loves Nolan's work, and they've worked on multiple projects over the last 2 decades. This was something else, though. It was a monumental task, and Cillian was understandably nervous about it. He leaned heavily on Nolan to fill the gaps in his knowledge and to help him understand who Oppenheimer really was. But the first thing he focused on was the man's physical appearance. If you've seen any photos of him, you'll notice he was really thin. He had this half-starved look where his cheeks were hollow and he looked perpetually exhausted. And that makes sense, because how else would a man responsible for the Manhattan Project feel? So, Cillian got to work. And what's interesting is that his physical prep didn't involve a whole lot of working out. He didn't reveal how much weight he lost to look the part, but it's clear from his scrawny appearance that it was a lot. He continued his extremely restricted diet during the film's production, and when I say extremely, I mean that he skipped most, if not all, cast dinners. Matt Damon said that his mind was simply too full from everything he had to accomplish. Playing a historical figure like Oppenheimer is no walk in the park, and it was Cillian's first time playing a lead in a Nolan project. The stakes were incredibly high, so he didn't have it in him to go out and let loose with the rest of his co-stars. He was immersed in the role and spent most of his time tinkering with the character. How to draw out his subtleties, how to perfect the 1,000-yard stare, and how to humanize a highly controversial figure. He had his work cut out for him, which is why he didn't socialize much. This led to a ton of memes on Twitter, though. Everyone found hilarious ways to co-opt his response. Don't feel like going out and socializing? Just tell everyone your mind's too full from everything you need to accomplish. Works like a charm. But it got a lot more serious than a few skipped meals. Cillian said that the filming schedule was absolutely insane. Nolan works at a scary speed. The cast and crew worked their way across the US very quickly, and this made it easy for Cillian to skip multiple meals altogether. It helped his performance and gave him an exhausted look that he was going for, but he barely got any sleep during heavy filming days. He described the long production as a train that keeps bombing. He worked on a scene, slept a few hours, woke up, did another scene, and repeat. It was really wild and hectic, but it suited Cillian's approach to the performance. He said Oppenheimer was a lot like that, too. He didn't eat, didn't sleep much, and was always on edge. So Cillian was completely dialed in, and he lived and breathed like Oppenheimer. But it was the smoking that really got to him. Oppenheimer was famous for always having a lit cigarette between his fingers. He'd be thinking about something or the other, and what calmed him down was lighting up a Chesterfield or smoking his pipe. He alternated between the two, and he smoked as many as 100 cigarettes a day. This is what eventually led to his death from throat cancer. And Cillian's no stranger to smoking. He smoked over 3,000 fake cigarettes throughout Peaky Blinders' entire run. That sounds insane, but it's completely believable if you're talking about Cillian. It shows how dedicated he is to his characters and won't back down from a challenge, even if it's an unhealthy one. And he's totally over it, because he doesn't want his next character to be a smoker. Actors usually smoke herbal cigarettes when they film a movie. They're not as harmful as conventional ones, but they still produce the same toxins. Cillian advised that he doesn't recommend anyone follow his methods or his diet for Oppenheimer. He became competitive with himself, seeing how much he could push himself to become Oppenheimer, both physically and mentally. It sounds like a really tough job, and it is. The role wasn't for the faint-hearted, which is exactly why Cillian was so into it. He loves characters that are layered and complicated. If it's someone with a one-note personality, he'll get bored easily. But if it's someone like Oppenheimer, he won't get enough. He prepared himself physically and picked up a smoking habit, but it's the mental prep that really brought out his talents. Nolan hired Kip Thorne, a Nobel Prize-winning theoretical physicist, and David Saltzberg, professor of physics and astronomy at UCLA, to serve as science advisors on the movie. Nolan's worked with Thorne previously when he made Interstellar, so it makes sense that he'd collaborate with him again. The man's a genius. But he was equally impressed with Cillian's ability to absorb information. He was really curious about the science behind the madness. So, Thorne had virtual meetings with him, and the two discussed interesting scientific theories. But here's what's really amazing. Thorne gave Cillian inside info about Oppenheimer, because he had first-hand experience watching him at Princeton. Those are insane odds. Kip attended seminars during the mid-1960s, where he saw how Oppenheimer conducted himself, how he spoke to the students, organized debates, and listened to everyone's different perspectives. Kip told Cillian all about it, which helped improve his understanding of the man. Saltzberg, on the other hand, met him during production and educated him on a number of different physics concepts. But what impressed him the most is how deep he went into the role. He asked questions that made Saltzberg double back and refresh his own concepts before he could explain them. Cillian fired incredibly technical questions at him, including one about the speed of a nuclear reaction and how particles interact with each other on a quantum level. It's something only a technical person would worry about, and I'm surprised Cillian immersed himself that deeply. But he's really humble about his experience. He had meetings upon meetings with the science geniuses and had dinners with them to discuss complex ideas and theories. But he said he still couldn't understand quantum mechanics. That makes two of us. He had a vague understanding of how it works, and that was enough to elevate his performance. And it shows on the big screen, too. He plays the part of a tortured genius brilliantly. There's no point where it looks like he doesn't understand what he's talking about, or that he's simply reading words off a piece of paper. That's dedication for you, folks. He's at the top of his craft in this one. But the two things that allowed him to peer directly into Oppenheimer's mind are American Prometheus, a biography on him that was written over the course of 25 years, and the Bhagavad Gita, a 700-verse Hindu religious text that focuses on ethical and moral philosophy. The Gita is really interesting because it focuses on the nature of self and the path of knowledge. It influenced Oppenheimer in a major way, and it's why Nolan asked Cillian to read it before production even started. This was a welcome challenge for him. He's been an atheist since he worked on Sunshine in 2007, so approaching a Hindu religious text was new and interesting. But he loved the experience. It added additional dimensions to Oppenheimer's psyche, which unlocked a deeper level in his performance. But did this have a lasting impact on his mind and body? He went through an insane diet, read all sorts of books and texts, and picked up a dangerous smoking habit. Normally, you'd expect an actor to come out of the experience as a changed person. Sometimes they suffer negative consequences because they deliberately throw themselves in the deep end. Leonardo DiCaprio slept in actual animal carcasses for The Revenant and suffered hypothermia. Daniel Day-Lewis refused to wear winter coats for Gangs of New York and caught pneumonia. Anne Hathaway lost a lot of weight in 2 weeks for Les Miserables, and it made her sick. The list goes on. But thankfully, Cillian didn't go through this. He knows that once you pour yourself into a role and then suddenly stop playing, because the production wrapped, it can be hard to bounce back. But he's already put on some healthy weight. He says he'll take a vacation after the press tour's done, and I'm totally on board with that. He deserves a long rest and an Oscar for Best Actor for his incredible dedication. So, from immersing himself in American Prometheus and the Bhagavad Gita to regularly skipping dinners with his cast members, that was how Oppenheimer took a huge toll on Cillian Murphy.